I'm Ellis Tucci, the creator of Spectra, which, if you know, you probably know for its environmental art. For a long while now, I wanted to do a little bit of a video breakdown on just how exactly I go about creating these structures, and it just so happens that I'm working on a little bit of a side project right now that requires the creation of a lot of small and medium-sized buildings. And so today I figured I would film this process and talk you through, start to end, just how you go about making a building. So with all of that said, I suppose, let's get started. Okay, so here we are in Blender, and we can see, we've got the reference image loaded in already right here. This, if you'd like to follow along at home, this is the Farmers and Mechanics building in Westchester, Pennsylvania. And I chose this building for a couple reasons. One, it's a very nice building. And two, there's a lot of visual complexity going on here that we can actually reduce down into a small number of replicable parts. So before we even start the building process, we want to take a look at the massing and the structure of the building itself. So in terms of massing, this is relatively simple. You've got a rectangular volume here with some outcropping bay windows. But it's when we look at the important part for this building in particular is going to be identifying the different parts of the structure that we can use to make a kit out of this building, right? So first we're going to take a look down here. We can see that we've got this 1.5 story height ground floor above this sub-basement. Usually on a standard building, the top of the window line will be hung on the same level as the top of the doorway. So when we see something like this, we can tell obviously this is a 1.5 height floor. Above here we've got this double window set with these keystones, and then we've got this bay window here with 3 windows, and we can notice down here on the bottom we have a slightly different cap than we'll find here on the middle floors. Then we can see on the top we've got this molding that ties off the bottom of this top section, and then we've got a triple pair of windows, or a triple set of windows with some columns and a series of indentations here, right? So our job in kind of making a good building is being able to look at this and identifying which parts we can simplify and still convey what this building is, and still have someone be able to look at the final model and say that is the Farmers and Mechanics building, right? And so before we get into the actual modeling, we can just say, down here we have got a set of 4 Corinthian columns. If you don't know your columns, Corinthian are the most geometrically complex type of column. So we are going to substitute that out for an Ionic or a Doric. This is a model that is going to be viewed not only from a medium distance, but in conjunction with a lot of other models, right? And so the key to being able to do this kind of stuff efficiently is finding points like that, things that you can simplify. You'll notice that if we take a look at this sub-basement right here, in reality, this lot is on a slight incline. So the front face of the sub-basement level at this front of the building is a little bit shorter, maybe about half of the height, as the height would be on the back of the lot. So that is another thing. That's no good. We're going to make that a consistent height throughout. And we'll also take a look at, here we have this side entrance here. that has been adapted to give the extra height of the sub-basement. So when we simplify something, a kind of base part of the building, we can then simplify the things that flow from it, right? So we're already going to make an entrance for the front here, and we're just going to be able to use that exact same entrance on the side, and nobody is going to care. And if we look, we can have one more thing that we can really simplify right off the bat. We have got these two non-standard windows here that are hung just a little bit above the regular 1.5 height windows. That again is something that we can very easily substitute out. We are just going to use the same other 2 instances of the same other 6 windows that we can find here, and that is going to look fantastic. We're also going to have to consider that not all buildings are perfectly symmetrical, and what that means in this case is that we have 2 faces of this building facing the street, and so we'll have 2 faces that are not necessarily meant to be viewed by a pedestrian. And so what you'll see a lot in real life, you can see a little bit of it on this serpentine stone building right here, is that you have the facing, and then on the side and the back walls you'll have a stone or you'll have a brick. And so we might do that in a couple places here. We'll probably for you know, these upper floors, we don't need to decide it now. That can be kind of like a game plan decision. But so we have identified the fundamental components of this building. So now the time begins for us to start modeling. And so the first thing that I do with every single building, and this is the way that I maintain good scale and consistency between models, is I always start with modeling a door and modeling a window. And so this model is going to be used along with a family of other models. You can see I have some of them over here. And this, if you're developing a series of models, this is a really great way to save time, because you can do what's called kit bashing, which is reusing pieces from other buildings. But what I do to start is I just steal a door and a window off of whatever model most closely fits the end goal, just to help simplify spacing right here. Oh, I'm not finding anything that is super close. So let's just find a good standard example right here, right? This will give us a good standard sized door and window. So let's move that off of here. And for this, you know, modeling is kind of a long process. So I might talk for bits, and then there might be parts where I'm just kind of like modeling out the piece, and I'll probably fast forward through that in the final edit. But let's just start by just getting our proportions here, and then we can delete the rest of this model. And so this is just something that is very important for a model, is maintaining the correct proportions of your doors and your windows. I see a lot of buildings that have kind of like an uncanny valley effect for architecture, and that usually comes down to your doors or windows are too wide or too narrow, or their spacing is a little bit irregular. In general, your door frame, your standard door frame, is going to be about as wide as your standard window. You can see in the pair that I grabbed here, the door is just a little bit wider than the window. That is just because on that model it had a slightly compacted window for stylistic reasons. But we are not going to totally cheat by reusing this window model. We are just going to rip off the proportions of this real quick. And if you don't have, if you don't, like me, have an existing bank of models that you're pulling from, you can just go on to Google Images. You can go onto the Home Depot website. Really anything that will give you the proportions of a door and a window, not necessarily the detailing, right? Because the detailing is going to come from the reference photo for our final model. So let us get rid of this. Oh, did I? Yes, I deleted that. Okay. So if we take a look here, we can see our standard window on here. This narrow window is going to be closer to something that we are going to find in the bay window. So we are going to keep this narrowed proportion, but we are just going to clone this, and we are going to make a slightly wider proportion window. Going to hold down Control and drag, and that'll let you drag along the grid line, and just adding, let's say, 0.3 meters to that in total, and that looks great. That looks just about as wide as our door. Yeah, that's pretty close. Okay. So I am going to kind of talk you through the process of making the windows, and then I am just going to kind of like bang out the model in silence for a bit until I have something further to say. But here we go, all right? So let's always, you can add a plane here instead of like doing a cube and then separating the face, right? But we can see here that these are double hung windows. They've got a slight setback. They've got a 2x setback before it gets to the glass pane. And so what we are going to do is first we are going to put in a loop cut to get our pane division. And then we are going to inset that once to get our first setback. And instead of extruding, I'm just going to move this face a little back to get a slight bit of tilt on those windows. And then we can see it'll extrude straight back, just a touch. And it's going to come in one more time, about that far. And then where it's going to extrude back a little bit more. And then we can see we have the final pane subdivision, right? So with both of these highlighted, I'm going to inset, so I'm going to click I, but I'm going to click I again, which will do a per pane separation. Oh, actually, I don't want to do the pane separation first. I want to just extrude this and set that back a tiny bit because those panes are a little bit offset. You can see in the photo. Oh, maybe that's a little bit too much. A lot of the process of creating a good building, right, is having your reference photo right there and constantly going back and forth and comparing your measurements and making sure something looks just right. And so let's now do something like right there. And this is, we're going to push that back again. And we're going to extrude. And there's our one-piece window. We are going to duplicate that. And there is our standard double window, right? So I am going to make this these keystones, and I'm going to make this this windowsill here. Just without commentary, or unless I think of something, because this is just some pretty straightforward stuff. Actually, let me see. Yeah, I'm probably just going to fast forward through this. Okay, I do have something to talk about now that the windowsill and the keystones are done. I do have something to talk to you about, which is a little bit of this is kind of like emblematic of how to make buildings quickly and well. Is that if we take a look real close at just what I made on the building, we can see these keystones. Those are pretty dead on because those are very simple, very easy to do. And if we look down here at the windowsill, we can see that on the real thing, we've got this top layer here, and then we've got a little bit of a pearl pattern, maybe like a Grecian wave, some kind of complicated textural pattern that would, one, I can't derive that from the reference image, and two, even if I could, it would take a long time to replicate faithfully on our building. And mind you, this building is going to be viewed from far away, to the point where nobody or their mother is going to be able to discern the scroll work on the bottom of a windowsill. And so it's kind of your job as a 3D artist is to identify those points where you can kind of make an efficiency for little to no fidelity loss, right? It's the same, we can see on the foot of the windowsill right here. You can see that it does have this kind of banding, but it also has that same scroll work there at the top, right? And it's much easier, much faster to just do that simple banding. And so one more thing, aside from that, one more thing before we move on to the next component of this model, which is, this is just a general tip, but I'm going to apply it here. You see on the windowsill, we have these very, very sharp corners. And you might think that that is how the model should be, because, that's a real life windowsill has that angle. But the way that we have this kind of 90-degree perfect right angle here on the model is not actually very common at all in real life buildings. And I think you'll find if we just take the edges here, and apply a one face bevel to there and one to there, all of a sudden that looks a lot more natural, right? It's still not the not that scroll work detail of the real reference windowsill, but it is definitely evocative of the reference in the layering, in the scaling, in these feet. And so I think this accomplishes what we want of our windowsill perfectly. And this is, a model that will have no problem replicating across the rest of the building. Let's actually maybe just make that a touch bigger. Okay, now we have our double window part of this. Let's move this to the side. And now we are going to put in temporarily the wall for this piece, so we can see on our reference where one floor starts and the other stops. We can see the top of this keystone is pretty well aligned with the bottom of the foot here. Maybe it is just an inch or two, maybe three lower out of alignment. And so that gives us a pretty good sense of how this spacing should look. Let's bring this down pretty low to maybe right about there. And this is just temporary walling. This might turn into the final wall depending on how much work we do to it. But let's just do something very imprecise for the time being, and let's push that back a little bit so it's not fighting with the keystones, and tuck that in right there. One thing we are going to do is we are going to, select the loop edge or the outer edge of these windows, and we are just going to extrude back so there's a face here, and that will let us make these windows set deeper or more shallow, depending on what we want out of the final look. But okay. Now we are going to let's take this down. Go across. And this doesn't need to be, we don't need to like merge those vertices or anything. Those will just be totally fine for our purposes. And let's take our windowsill, let's join those meshes, apply auto smoothing, and then move that out so you can see it nice and protruding from the wall. That looks pretty close to our source in terms of the spacing on the wall. Maybe this goes just a touch more there, and a touch more here. And this is going to be useful for later texturing purposes, but we're just going to add a loop cut down into this bottom part here, and we're going to center that up. And okay, that looks like our double window part done. We have a single window on the other side, and that is going to be very simple. Let us just move this out of the way for a second. Move that out here, duplicate these pieces. Delete this one window. And then let's see, it's going to be delete. Delete. Boom. Can come into here, select our vertices, move these guys over. Do the same thing for our our windowsill, and you can see kind of like already in the process of making this model, we can start reusing pieces to expand and make the rest of the model more efficiently. You know, you can see it took us maybe 3 or 4 minutes to do the double window, and then it took us 30 seconds to do the single window, right? Oh, so now that we have both of those pieces, let us, I think, take a tackle at this bay window. So to do that first, let us get our narrow window done that is going to get inset into the bay window. And we're going to do this the exact same way that we did the other window. And we are going to keep those right next to it just so we can use it as reference. Actually, you know what? We are going to reuse another part. And we are just going to, let me undelete that. We're going to reuse another part, and we are just going to edit this existing window and push it in here. And there we have it. 30 seconds, reused another model. There you go. Okay, so how do we want to tackle this bay window? we can look and we look at the proportion, and that's maybe a little bit wider than our double window. So let's just get let's start with the scaling. You always want to start with the scaling when you're blocking out a new piece. So let's say, or let us do a layout to get a better sense of scale for just how big we want this new piece. Right, so we've got, if it is the same width as our double wall piece, then let's come in here. Yeah, so that's about the window width. Yeah, that's a little bit wider, about the window width. And I would say, let's maybe move this guy a little bit closer. Yeah, move these a meter in. That looks pretty close. Maybe these outer walls are a touch wider, and I think the inner wall. So let's do, let's make this a tiny, tiny bit wider. Zoom in and move along the grid. Let's do 0.5 meter. That feels good. That feels really nice. Like that's going to give us a good arch when we are extracting the bay window out of this block. Okay. So now let's pull our reference back. And so we look, and our height is going to be the same as the existing piece, the existing wall piece, because we've got this from height to height, including these medallions here, right? So from this little garland down to here is the exact same height as the double window. So let's start with aligning our windows. Let's hide that for a second. Oh, I don't want to hide that because I don't have to. Okay, so here we have the general structure of the bay window. So I, created this cube, and then once I aligned the windows, I beveled it down so that I had the smooth faces that I want. And because I'm going to cut out the parts of this this shape that overlap with the windows, I took the natural lines formed by the beveling process, and I just aligned those a little bit better with the corner of my windows, or with the edges of my windows, so that I can come in and I can add 2 loop cuts, and we are going to delete the back of this. But so then I can come in here and I can just select the overlapping mesh, and there we go. So we have the basic structure of our bay window with the holes cut out. We are going to come back here and we are going to extrude out a tiny bit just to cover in these holes, and that will also give us a better look when we add transparency to this glass later in the process. But okay. So Okay. I think that looks like just about the end of our bay window. So let us join this together. And I think we might want to make a post-hoc decision that that bay window is a tiny bit flatter. So we'll just scale that down and widen that a touch. Yeah, that feels a lot better. Okay, and that gets us closer back to our original window size too. Okay, so now we have the basic structures of the body. We just need to do the base, and we just need to do the top. But first, let's do this. Let us extend the length 1/2 meter here. Let's join this whole piece together. Yeah, that feels good. Okay. Okay. Quick interruption to just mention that I just added a new part to this by scaling an existing part to -1 along the x-axis, right? And that's perfectly fine to do, but just every time that you do that, make sure that you are calculating your normals correctly. Otherwise, it's going to be a huge pain in the butt when it comes time to export your model. So with the piece you just inverted selected, do Control A, apply scale, and then go into your drop downs here and click face orientation, and you can see, yeah, it's almost all red, which means it's inside out, and we can see part of our keystones here. We also need to flip those, because if we remember, we did flip those inside out during the initial window process. But with that in mind, I'm just going to build out the shell of this middle piece real quick, just to give you a better sense of the structure and size of this building. Okay, so we can see now that I've got 2 walls of the building kind of sketched out, we can see that a good chunk of the building is already done now, just with the essentially the creation of 3 modular parts that we have used over and over again. So now we are just going to repeat this kind of process bit by bit to develop the mezzanine level, and then to develop the ground floor. So I am going to go back through the process that I just kind of talked you through. You can see I've got to create some arched windows for the top floor, I've got to create some double height windows or 1.5 height windows for the ground floor, etc., etc., etc. I've got to create some pillars. Spoiler alert, I'm going to steal those off of an existing model. But anyway, I think I am probably just going to let the rest of the modeling session continue to go through at a faster rate, and then I'll probably get back to you when it is time to start texturing. Okay. Okay, one point or one thing while we're working on this top penthouse layer right here. We have got this kind of irregular window shape that would be a bit of a pain to do if we're just, doing loop cuts and throwing in bevels here and there. So we already have the windows laid out for what is going to be our top piece that we're going to replicate across the rest of the model. And so we are just going to use the knife tool and cut out holes for these windows real quick. But actually, before we do that, and we're going to do this for texturing reasons, which will become clear later. We are going to separate that from the rest of the piece, and we are going to subdivide that really quickly. And now we are going to take the knife tool and we are just going to cut these out. Okay, so we have all of the necessary parts to replicate the rest of the building complete. We have got our base here, we've got our entrance, we've got the curved doorway. Because we are making that sub-basement the same height, there aren't going to end up being any windows there, which is totally fine. We have got our bay windows with the unique top and bottom cap parts. We've got our 4 intermediary floors, and then we have got this top kind of penthouse cornice level with the triple windows. And now that means that it is time to texture. So I use a program that I have been using for many years called Quixel Mixer. This was kind of like a Substance Painter alternative that cropped up a number of years ago, and it was kind of bought and subsequently killed by Epic Games. You can still download Quixel Mixer and you can still use it. Obviously I'm still using it, but you'll see like downloading new texture types is a little bit of a pain, but thankfully, because I have been using this for so long, I have a bank of already downloaded texture types that I can pull from, and you'll see, right? But we are going to create a new material type, and we are going to call this mid-rise brick. And this is going to be our body brick here. And we can see this is a relatively closely laid yellow orangish brick with not too much variation in its color between its lightest and its darkest brick. So we are going to come in here into our local library, and we are going to see what types of brick we have. And we are looking for something mainly that just does not have a whole lot of color variation. This is close, but these bricks are maybe a little bit too thin for me. Let's see, let's look a little bit more. Let's take a look at something like this. This is a yellow brick, and let's see if we can add a little bit more orange. Oh, that's too much. Yeah, let's look for a different type of brick. Let's go back up to, oh, where did he go? To this one. Yeah, this will have to be fine, and we will just make the color in this a little bit more intense. There we go. And we are going to save our mid-rise brick, and we are going to export that. And now we need to create this this stone here that is going to go on our the top of our building. So let's look at our various stones. This dirty terrazzo looks like it will serve us well. And we are looking for something a little bit creamier. Something right about there. And we are going to call this, oh, nope, that was a mistake. I accidentally overwrote mid-rise brick, so let's export that again. And let's go back to this, and now we are going to save this as, let's call this mid-rise stone 1, and export that. And now for our last material, I already have something that I'm going to use for this kind of burgundy wood, but I am going to look for a kind of stone brick a little bit here, and we're going to match that to the terrazzo color. This gray stone facade looks like it's great, so let's come in here to our previous stone and just pull out the hex value. And that looks pretty good. Yeah, so you can obviously do like a lot more complex material kind of synthesis with this program. You can layer on a bunch of materials, you know, that's how I create, like, you know, grimy rusted enamel metal, right? As you just layer a bunch of these on top of each other and you adjust the scaling and the opacity, etc., etc., etc. But we should have all of our materials ready to go. Okay, so now we have all of the necessary materials. It's time to assemble them into what I refer to in my internal documentation as a texture palette, but is really like a texture atlas, if you're familiar with that term. You can use any image editor for this. I use this web-based editor called Pixlr, which I just pay like 99 cents a month for. But we are going to create a new texture. And first I want to keep this, that kind of roof gravel for industrial buildings. So let's toss that back in there. And now we need to go to the materials we just created. And so those are in like your, oh, did I not export stone 2? No, I didn't. So let's export that. And so those are just in a folder that the program creates directly onto your computer. And so let's drop in mid-rise brick here. Mid-rise stone 1. And mid-rise stone 2. Now that first we want to scale up the presence of this brick here. And now that I'm looking at this, the stone facade and the kind of raw stone next to each other, the color difference is a little bit, or the texture and the roughness difference is a little bit more than I would like to see. And so whenever that happens, let's just take our stone up here and let's get this to the eventual size that we want to have it on the palette. And let's extend that. And then let's just bring our stone layer up, scale that over. Let's bring that back down here just so we can keep that for its own use. And now we just want to bring the opacity way down. And something like that feels much better than just the bare stone all by itself. Okay, we will put the rest of this in here. And I have that burgundy wood saved somewhere in a previous texture. And we're just going to go grab that here. Okay, now this should be, this is kind of sloppily done real quick. There's a little bit of dead space in our texture, but that is not the end of the world. Let us just take a look and make sure that we're not missing anything. We need some brown wood for our door, and I should have one of those in my existing textures that I can grab. Let's just do this. And we will overlay that with just a little brown layer, a little more like in your face, bright brown, something like that. There, that feels a lot better for that wood. And let's see, we'll need something for this base here, another stone or a concrete. This will be perfect right here. So let's drop that in. And these awnings too, let's see, we can just grab a black metal from a previous texture. And, oh, let's put this up here. Yeah, that should be perfect. That should be perfect. Now we're just going to export our kind of sloppily done texture, and let's call this mid-rise building 2 texture palette. Now it comes to doing the actual texturing on the model itself. So this happens in 2 stages. First, we're going to texture all of the non-glass pieces. And then once everything is textured, we're going to build out the rest of the building with the textured pieces. And then we are going to export the finished model, whereafter we're going to apply the roughness to our material and then add the final glass material to all of our windows. So let's start out by creating a new material, and let's call this m_midrise building 2 palette. I always like to match the names of the materials exactly with the texture file, just with like a different prefix, m_ versus t_, etc., etc. And then you'll see like the final asset will be a_. So it's good to just keep your naming consistent. And so let's pull in that file here, and you can see like, immediately it looks completely messed up. And now let's pull this up here. And so texturing is very, very important. And how we texture our building is going to be ultimately dependent on how the building is going to be used. So this model in particular, and all of the models that I make, they are going to be placed at runtime by the player under dynamic lighting, which means that there's going to be no baked lighting or no baked effects on these models at all. In general, if you're using Unreal Engine 5, you're going to be using, if you're lighting your scene with Lumen, that is an all dynamic system, and so this approach will not give you any problems at all. And so because we do not have to worry about baked lighting, that also means we don't have to worry about overlapping UVs on our texture. If you are like baking shadows into a model and you have a lot of overlapping UVs, you can get texture errors, you can get weird black marks and shadows where they shouldn't be. But because we're lighting this model with a dynamic system, and because we're using Unreal Engine, which has a dynamic lighting system in and of itself, overlapping UVs will be no problem for us. And so we are just going to unwrap our initial piece, and we are going to condense these UVs real quick. Just grab some of these overhanging guys and bring that into this model here. That seems about a good scale for the repetition on that texture. Let's come into here and select our glass materials. This guy should be a little bit further back. Come in here and select our glass, and we are going to add just a standard filler material to our model that is going to serve the purpose of our glass for now, and then later on that's going to be replaced by a glass material. But for now we don't need to worry about it. We are now going to come in and select our non-stone pieces of this model, which are going to be our window linings. And let's see, let's give these, I know they're like a metallic in the source model, but let's give these the standard red filler, or actually those are black in the model. Those will actually probably look a little bit better black. But yeah, because you don't need to worry about overlapping UVs, it makes this a very straightforward texturing process, and it makes it pretty painless. People can really hate texturing and doing UVs because it can be a real pain. But if you don't have to worry about overlapping, it is really not a problem. It's only about making sure that you have your source palette, those textures that you're sampling scaled to the correct size so that they don't look totally out of whack on your final model. So without further ado, I'm going to go through and I'm going to texture each of these component pieces, and then once I'm finished with that, we can build out the rest of the model with the finished textured components. Okay, we now have our completely geometrically complete model. This only needs two more things. It needs its roughness map, and it needs the glass material. So I am going to merge this model together. I'm going to export that, and the next thing that you will see is, I guess, me loading up the glass on the final model. Okay, here we have our final building. If I do say so myself, I think it turned out very well. I think the resemblance to the Farmers and Mechanics building is really clear, and if you showed it to someone who lives in Westchester, they would absolutely recognize it. I think we did a good job of simplifying where things could be simplified while still conveying the kind of form and the flow of the building in a way where no major things were compromised. I hope that this has been kind of helpful to you, to kind of show you the ropes of how I go about doing this stuff from beginning to end. This took me about 2 hours. It will probably take maybe an hour and a half if I wasn't filming myself and explaining all the things that I was doing. But you can, you can get this down to a pretty cute, efficient little process. So I would encourage you to, if you thought this was interesting, if this answered any questions that you had, go out and go into your neighborhood and take a picture of a building and see if you can go home and recreate it on the computer. And if you do, send me a picture on Twitter, because I would love to see your work. Well, thank you so much if you've made it this far for sitting through my first little tutorial. If this is something you would like to see more of, please feel free to let me know, and let me know if there is any specific areas that you would like me to cover, and if there is enough interest, I will do my best. Well, I guess that's it. Thank you very much, and maybe tune in next time.